Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about this proposal out of the city of Baltimore in the wake of the spike of juvenile crime that we've reported on this channel multiple different times, and that is, of course, to hold the parents accountable for the crimes of the children. Yes, Ivan Bates, who's actually done a pretty decent job in bringing back down the murder rate to pre-Marilyn Mosby levels, pre-Freddie Gray levels, has actually decided to take it one step further and say, you know what, if the law is going to make it damn near impossible to hold juvenile offenders accountable, then I'm going to take the extra step and hold the parents that allow their children to misbehave in these sometimes extremely violent criminal ways accountable for those kids' actions. Now, we're going to talk about this. I might actually surprise you on what my position is on this proposal, but before we do that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
New juvenile justice laws went into effect today after years of prosecutors, police, and parents calling for change. But some critics say the new legislation doesn't go far enough, and many are concerned about the role the Department of Juvenile Services will play in enforcing change.
So first things first, this local news segment actually talks about a juvenile reform bill, which, by the way, ended up passing and actually became effective on the day of Halloween, October 31st, 2024. And essentially what this sought to address was the problem that they were having with youthful offenders who would be arrested for things like carjacking, sometimes even armed carjackings, and the only recourse that the police had was to drop off those very same children right back at their parents' house, even if the parent is saying, hey, I have no control over this kid. I think he's going to kill somebody or get killed himself. Can you please hold him in custody? Well, a part of this law actually extends the powers of the Juvenile Services Division to go as low as age 10. Previously, the cutoff was 13, so if you had a 12, 11, or 10-year-old, automatically you were just going to get dropped off at your parents' home with no consequences for your actions. But it actually goes a little bit further than that, which I think is a pretty good thing, so let me address that as well. So the law also requires specifically that any child charged with motor vehicle theft get a Children in Need of Supervision petition, or CINS petition. While CINS petitions had not been mandatory before, filing one now will also qualify the youth and the family for a series of services.
New juvenile justice laws went into effect today after years of prosecutors, police, and parents calling for change. But some critics say the new legislation doesn't go far enough, and many are concerned about the role the Department of Juvenile Services will play in enforcing change.
So in the opening of the Fox 45 Baltimore segment, you guys might have heard the reporter say that some believe that this law, these changes don't go far enough. And this is kind of the perfect example of that, because the CINS petition, those are not punitive. Those are not real serious consequences. This is just something to offer troubled youth services. But before, under the law, if your kid stole a car or if a child stole a car, this is something that was optional for them to be referred to services, and now it's mandatory. So at least you're getting a paperwork trail of the offenses that these kids are participating in, and you're trying to redirect them to reform programs, which is kind of crucial because this is always going to be the first step when it comes to youth crimes. But if you leave it as an option, it won't be taken when you catch them the first, second, or third time that they steal a car, and ultimately when they finally hurt somebody, that's going to be treated as a first offense. So again, this doesn't really solve the issue. It doesn't address it with the seriousness that it needs, but it is a step in the right direction. Now, in addition to that, one of the things that's aggravating the public defender is the fact that you do have options for detention for youths that commit these crimes. Now, of course, a Maryland public defender known as Natasha Dartridge called this in an email a major step backwards for children. Quote, by increasing detention for lower level nonviolent misdemeanors and expanding the criminalization of children under the age of 13, Maryland is subjecting more children, particularly children of color, innocent bebe angel Aladdins of color, from marginalized communities to the harms of detention and the trauma of the criminal legal system, while achieving no true public safety benefit, Dartridge wrote. Again, this is the public defender. Quote, it has been proven that therapeutic and rehabilitative services have both short and long-term benefits for the child, the victim, and the community, all of which can be achieved without the trauma or negative impact of incarceration. Now look, this is one of those woke public defenders that never wants anybody punished for anything, so of course she's going to spit out all this nonsense about how you just need to therapize the kids and never punish them because it's so traumatic to put these innocent little baby angel Aladdins through the criminal justice system. But you know what I would argue is traumatic? The violent crime that they're committing, the armed carjacking that they're getting away with over and over and over again, and the fact that now gangs, knowing that they had these previous reforms that made it basically impossible to prosecute these youths, are using them for more and more dangerous and violent crimes. This is why the recruitment is getting younger and younger, and this is the problem that Baltimore faces, and Ivan Bates, the district attorney, understands this problem, even if this public defender refuses to see it. Now again, what they're trying to fix is the Juvenile Justice Reform Law of 2022 that said that children younger than 13 may not be charged with the crime unless it's a violent offense. Under that law, all police could do was sort of wag their finger at them and say no, 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 and then send them home, which is exactly the problem that we've been talking about. Now I'm going to link this article in full in the description because they end up mocking the public defender who's pretending this was like the end of the world. But again, this law, this reform was passed in 2022. We've seen a spike in youth offenders. Worst case scenario, we'll go back to pre-22 levels in terms of youth crime, which would be a benefit to the city of Baltimore because these kids are absolutely out of control. And I want to give you some examples from this local news segment so you can understand how wild it has been getting.
Well, Kai, as you know, over the past week or so, Baltimore City has seen over a dozen juveniles arrested for various crimes, including assault and armed carjackings. One of the youngest suspects, 12 years old, and tonight, talk of holding parents accountable. In Baltimore, an issue top of mind once again, holding parents accountable in some cases when their children commit the crime. The concern stirred up this week after police say a 13-year-old squeegee kid assaulted a 51-year-old man in his vehicle in West Baltimore Tuesday morning.
So we have a bunch of different offenses that are referenced, and specifically a kid who was being a squeegee boy for some reason on a school day while he was not in school, deciding to go out of his way to assault a 51-year-old man, and again, that person was at the age of 13. Now, of course, I told you guys in the open that the original juvenile reform law didn't allow prosecution of non-violent crimes, so you guys would think that things like armed carjacking, which has the threat of violence, or even assault were crimes that were prosecutable, that were jailable, but oftentimes what ends up happening is that they'll recategorize crimes that are violent as non-violent, and those will also be in the exemption category. Very famously in California and in New York, they decided to downgrade strangulation to a non-bail eligible in New York, but a non-violent crime in California, even though that's absurd.
A school day.
He should have been in school and his parents need to be held accountable. Blame the parents. Because my 10-year-old, if he's not in school, I know his whereabouts. I know where he is at all times.
And just the day before the alleged incident, City State's Attorney Ivan Bates.
To me, one of the things we need to talk about with juvenile justice is parental accountability.
With political commentator Armstrong Williams for his Your Voice, Your Future town hall Monday. Among the topics discussed, Bates reiterating his plans to crack down on parents when their children are the criminal offenders.
They're those parents who, no matter what happens, they could care less what their children are going to do. Doesn't matter what age they are, they're just not engaged to being a parent. Those are the parents I'm looking at.
So what Ivan Bates is proposing is something that sounds really good to a lot of people. You heard the woman on the streets that was in her car saying that, yes, blame the parents, it's their fault. But the fact of the matter is, this is actually not as easily done as it is said. And I do want to point out that there's a power in rhetoric that is not necessarily matchable with action, which is why the juvenile justice reform previous to his proclamation was so important, because you have to go after the criminal kids, and going after the parents is not necessarily going to be a solution, and by the way, is not necessarily going to be possible in most cases.
Defense attorney Brandon Meade
There's going to be a lot of hurdles for the government to really go after parents.
Believes going after the parent may prove hard to do. As Maryland lawmakers convene next session, Meade says drafting legislation targeted at holding parents accountable for the crimes their children commit could be difficult at best, not possible at worst.
I think that there will be some constitutional hurdles for the legislature to get over when it comes to holding parents accountable legally. Because realistically, even though, there are children, they are their own person.
So look, I'm actually in agreement with this guy that this piece of legislation that they're trying to craft at the statewide level and Ivan Bates trying to use the tools that he already has in order to hold parents accountable is going to be quite difficult. Because what exactly are you going to charge the parents with when the kids are getting away with armed carjackings over and over and over again? The best you could do is neglect. The best you could do is something related to their truancy, but that's a real dodgy situation when these kids are in gangs and being used by elder gang members as enforcers because of the lower consequences for use in those categories. Because of the soft on crime approach incentivizing this, that's why the gangs are pushing in this direction. So we're going to end up in a situation where I believe long term, this is going to only be used selectively against certain parents while other people are able to skate. Now, there was a famous case in Michigan where you had a school shooter and the parents appeared to know that he was a threat. They got him the gun anyway, and that's a big issue, and that was a niche case, and I don't know exactly how I feel about that one specifically, but the fact of the matter is, I understand the reason why people want to push in this direction, because at some point, you just want to say to the parents, get a hold of your kids, hold them accountable, but the fact of the matter is, these same parents are oftentimes calling the police on their kids and asking for their assistance, asking for them to be jailed, only to be told that Maryland law passed in the wake of the Black Lives Matter riots has been changed in order to make that impossible. So I see a situation where parents who are proactively trying to engage with law enforcement are going to be the ones that are prosecuted, and the ones that are really neglectful, that don't give a damn about their kids, they're not going to have enough paperwork in order to reach Ivan Bates' desk in order for him to pursue those charges. So you're actually probably going to get the worst possible outcome, which is the parents that are more engaged but can't control their kids getting prosecuted, while the parents who barely pay attention to their kids are going to get away scot-free, and those kids are going to continue to commit crimes.
Still, the city's top prosecutor persists as frustration fuels the call for something to be done to hold parents or juvenile offenders accountable.
Now, of course, Ivan Bates doubles down despite my reservations on whether or not this could be implemented in terms of policy, because the fact of the matter is, it is good politics. But I do think that is incredibly notable and something that I want to highlight for you guys, because if you'll recall, when we did the Adnan Syed case, we actually talked about this very same district attorney's office because that was under the jurisdiction where that case was prosecuted, and we talked about how Marilyn Mosby, the woke Black Lives Matter activist district attorney who doesn't prosecute anyone for anything, wouldn't commit to freeing Adnan Syed, who, by the way, is 100% guilty. But conversely, in the Democratic primary, Ivan Bates at the time was saying that he was going to free Adnan, and he was running on a more reformist platform than even Marilyn Mosby. So he was running to the left of Mosby, who was absolutely horrible, and again, was the person who pursued cases that she knew were not legitimate in the Freddie Gray case. Well, guess what? This time around, now that he's come into office, a full election cycle later, he is actually running on holding criminals accountable, not letting them out of prison, and that just goes to show you the complete and utter change in terms of criminal justice reform and how it plays politically in the American society. Because even Baltimore, a city that is overwhelmingly majority black, a city that was gripped by Black Lives Matter back in 2015 with the Freddie Gray stuff, before it was cool, before it caught on, and other places, have decided to reject this platform completely, and we've seen the results of Bates, at least with adult offenders and gun offenders, prosecuting them seriously, not paying any mind to this criminal justice reform. So again, we're actually going in a directionally correct direction, even in places like Baltimore, even with guys like Ivan Bates, who again, don't really have that ideology that your Soros DA typically has. What they have is, I want to be successful in politics as an ideology, and now they see their best path forward is to actually prosecute criminals. So we're actually in a better place today than we were 4 years ago in terms of the attitudes of the American people. So I want to give credit to the residents of Baltimore and to you guys out there in the audience all over the country who put crime as a high-ranking issue in your local elections to get us moving in the right direction.
Realistically, a lot of these kids don't have two-parent homes. And if you take the one parent that they do have and throw them in jail for them acting up, then what's that do to the kid going forward?
So again, while this might surprise many of you out there in the audience, I'm in agreement with Mead. A lot of these people are in single parent households. We know that to be true. And the fact of the matter is, removing that one parent and incarcerating that parent while still continuously refusing to prosecute the kid that's in a gang, that's committing armed carjackings, that's committing all these assaults, won't actually solve the problem. And what we're looking for is not the toughest sounding crime legislation or the toughest sounding crime attitude. What we're looking for is the best way to reduce crime, to reduce victimization, and we're trying to do the smartest way. I mean, people often try to paint me as this crazy tough on crime guy, but the fact of the matter is, I want to be smart on crime. I want to do things that work. I want to live in reality, engage with reality, and one of the things that I often call out the left for over and over and over again is their idea, their mindset that criminals are Aladdin and they're innocent baby angels that need to be defended at every turn, because in reality, they got hearts of gold and they don't actually mean the things that they're doing. But the facts are what they are. A lot of criminals are destroyers. These are people that will bring down your society if you let them, and they need consequences. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all consequences, or just jacking up the consequences on everybody around them, is going to lead to positive results. So I do think this policy, while politically smart, is actually quite half-baked. Again, for parents that are negligent and all that, charge them if you will, but you have to think these policies through before you jump on them. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute madness of this Baltimore proposal. Till next time.